What makes the Genesis narrative so important? There are so many assumptions that surround the narrative of Genesis chapter 1. For many centuries, many have held to the idea that the intent of the narrative is to communicate that the earth was created in 7 days, while many others have also used the narrative to focus on the interpretation that God's rest is the Sabbath rest. On the contrary, research at the International Institute of Pneumatology has rediscovered, through the lens of the ancient Hebrews perspective, that the narrative was not meant to communicate the creation of the cosmos, but it actually holds the key to a very crucial understanding that will impact mankind forever. To find answers, we were faced with the necessity of abandoning the entire westernized perspective of the scriptures and embracing the ancient Israelite perspective or the ancient Hebrew system of thought. Through this perspective, we rediscovered that the prophet Moses wrote the Genesis narrative specifically to 1. Identify Yahweh, the God of Israel, as the greatest God among all other gods of the surrounding nations, and 2. Identify that in comparison to the gods of other nations that occupied large temples such as ziggurats, the temple of the God of Israel is all of the heaven and the earth within which the gods of the other nations exist. If you have not heard this before, that's most likely because you have read and interpreted the Bible through a very westernized philosophical perspective, and not through the lens of the thought heritage of the authors of the text. Most of our modern-day translations of the Bible have unfortunately inherited the reorganized format of the earliest translation of the text, among other adjustments. And as a result, it is very easy for the modern-day reader to assume that the Bible is inherently akin to the conceptual heritage of the 20th century Westerner. The very first step in understanding the creation narrative of the Bible is to eliminate the idea that the author is writing from the culture and paradigmatic lens of westernized society. The second step is to make a very clear differentiation between the conceptual culture of the westernized Greco-Roman mind, which is fundamentally abstract, and the conceptual culture of the mind of the ancient Hebrews, which is concrete, functional, or actionable. Another important point to note is that there are patterns found within the scriptures that are designed to give us context to what we are reading. They help us to identify the functionality of its references. One of the patterns that we have identified through the ancient Hebrew scriptures is the 7-day pattern. Do you know that in the era within which Moses wrote the Genesis narrative, it was typical that temples will be inaugurated into function after 7 ceremonial days? This is also seen with both the tabernacle as well as the temple of the Old Testament, which were also detailed reflections of the Garden of Eden of the creation narrative. In other words, the context of the 7 days of the creation narrative was not related to the creation of the cosmos in 7 days, but the ceremonial establishment of a temple, a garden temple. But that's not all. Do you know that the Genesis narrative also communicates that man, created in the image and likeness of God, was also heaven and earth, and God Himself in flesh? If you would like to learn more about this, access the Reboot Your Biblical Perspective podcast at www.patreon.com/Zane_il_fuego. Become a Spiritual Goal Patreon today. This is a production of the Zane K. Keturah International Institute of Pneumatology. We are dedicated to the pragmatic and experimental research, as well as education on the energetic physics of the Holy Spirit of Christ and inadvertently the energetic physics of all spirits. If you would like to become a supporter and benefit from insightful podcasts from which this information was taken, please consider joining the Spiritual Gold tier at www.patreon.com/Zane_il_fuego.